please turn off your cell phones. Thank you. Christopher will be signing books at the Let's Talk Books table, where you can make your purchase from the lovely Jennifer Bogart. Thank you, Jennifer. We respectfully acknowledge that we are on the treaty and traditional territory of the Mississauga Anishinaabe. We offer gratitude to the First Peoples for their care and teachings about our earth and our relations. May we honor those teachings. My name is Lynn Bilton, and I have the privilege of being your MC this evening. Tonight's music has been kindly provided by a gentleman who is a multi-instrumentalist, a recording artist, a composer, an arranger, and conductor. In addition, he accompanies scores of musicians in live performances. He plays well with others. Please give a thank you to Tom Lathan. Many of you here know a bit of Christopher's background. In brief, he spent 33 years with the Canadian Opera Company. His first book, Dr. Bartolow's Umbrella and Other Tales from My Surprising Operatic Life, was a memoir of his singing career. Christopher moved to Northumberland in 2017, where he dug into community life, volunteering with many local arts groups. He hit the ground running. He is enjoying his position as editor of everyone's favorite magazine, Watershed. His seasonal story, Tree of Light, was made into a film by West Bend in 2020 and received over 5,000 YouTube views over 2 seasons. And you can see him at West Bend this Sunday in Chocolate Voices. Christopher's play, Nail Polish, will be performed 3 times at the upcoming Northumberland Festival of the Arts. He is also performing with Marie Lynn Hammond and myself in our group What Fun at 2 events during the festival. Marie Lynn is on vacation and she sends her best wishes. Thorneside Stories is inspired by Christopher's new rural life. He cares for his characters. From the absurd to the ludicrous, his entertaining tales overflow with authenticity. Thorneside Stories embraces country life, secrets, loves and loss, complete with a generous helping of humor. You are in for a treat. And don't be surprised if you see yourself in one of those chapters. Please give a warm welcome to Christopher Cameron.
It's not quite in my nose yet, but it's just getting there anyway. Thank you for coming out on such a beautiful, well, almost a summer night, isn't it? Welcome and thank you for coming again. When I was preparing for this event, I looked back on the notes for my first book launch 5 years ago and noticed I had started with those same words, welcome and thank you for coming. And then underneath in pen, I had written, read this line even if 4 people show up. I'm so glad you showed up. I'd like to speak very briefly about how and why I wrote Thorneside Stories, and then I'm going to read some selections for you. Not too many, I promise. And there may end up being a musical interlude somewhere in there, we'll see. So about the book, my mini elevator speech for Thorneside Stories is the love child of Stephen Leacock and Lady Chatterley. If that helps at all. I don't know. It'll either help you buy it or not. I've been asked if Thorneside Stories, well, Felicity's asked me if Thorneside Stories is a novel or a collection of short stories, and my answer is always yes. It is both, and it's neither. But when I first came to Northumberland in 2017, I had a few short stories in the trunk, in various stages of completion. And I also saw a chance, though, to weave them together using the rural setting as a backdrop. So this book has a lot of individual characters and plots that have their own lives and their own stories, but just about all of them are eventually linked together. Now, the other question Felicity asked me in a way was, are you in my novel? And well, again, yes and no. There's a song by Jimmy Rankin called The Mull River Shuffle. And there's a wonderful line in there that I love. Raisin a glass and raisin hills. There's plenty of stories that they will tell. Some are born of true detail and some are purely fiction. Anyway, I'm here to say that pretty well all of my fiction has the little tendril of a root in true detail, and so does my book. So you may recognize some thinly disguised settings, such as the Thorn River, which is standing in for a river I happen to live on, which is similar name. Everyone might see a character trait of someone they know, but beyond a scene here, a little characteristic there, all of the Thorneside stories are just that, purely fiction. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. If anybody wants to take it up with me, I'll discuss it. I just want to tell you there are three sets of characters, distinct sets of characters in Thorneside Stories. The main sort of group is a group of 4 women who play bridge together every week. And they each have separate lives. In fact, they don't even live in the same town, but their stories become quite closely intertwined. And then there are the next group of 2 local men who find themselves in conflict with one another over Tim Hortons coffee cups, if you can imagine. And then there are the first people you're going to meet, the members of the St. Ninian's Anglican Church Choir. So I'd like to read you a little bit from the prologue to the book that introduces some of the choir to you. It was generally agreed by the choir, everyone can hear me by the way, is that okay? It was generally agreed by the choir that Father Bannon would never have crashed his Toyota Prius into the oak tree in front of St. Ninian's Church if he'd had both hands on the steering wheel. The choir members had rushed out onto the dark lawn from their Thursday night choir practice to see what had caused the terrible noise of splitting wood and breaking glass. When Bert Mumby from the tenor section had yanked open the Prius's door, out spilled the Reverend. There was no mistaking that his left hand was buried up to the wrist somewhere beneath his clothing. He spent the rest of the evening in the rectory recovering with a bruised forearm and mild scald marks on his right thigh from where his Tim Hortons had splashed over him when he hit the tree. When the choir members shuffled over to the Thorneside Brew Club after the disrupted practice, Father Bannon's accident occupied at least the first 20 minutes of their conversation. But the topic was soon worn out, like a dog's chew toy, and the conversation moved on, eventually drifting to the recent photo in the Thorneside News of a woman over in Houston's who'd been kicked in the head by her horse. No one was disputing that it had happened, but the debate was still on over whether the photo had been taken before or after she got kicked. There weren't many others in the pub, just the regulars and one man on his own, whom no one recognized, sitting at a small table with his laptop, like people from the city did. A couple of the men from the bass section had pulled out an ancient block of Trivial Pursuit cards, bars being where these cards go to die. And they were rippling through them, firing questions at each other. Here's one I haven't seen, said Gord Peck, who had the box of cards. Who is buried in Grant's tomb? Larry Hermanson knew that one instantly. Ulysses S. Grant. Gord turned the card over and looked at the answer. Nope. What do you mean, no? Demanded Larry. I've been there. It's in New York City. General Ulysses S. Grant is buried in there. That's why it's called Grant's. That's not what it says here. Look, I know I'm right, Larry said, not wanting to let go. Your card must be wrong. General and Mrs. Grant, said a nearby voice, sonorous and clear, but neutral. No one, as they turned to look in the direction of the voice, recognized the person who had spoken, but it was the man sitting by himself, the one with the laptop computer. Sorry, said Larry, turning right around in his chair. He's right, said Gord Peck. That's what it says here, General and Mrs. Grant. Well, I was right then. I just wasn't all the way. You've seen the cards before, I gather, Gord said to the man. A few times, yes. Sorry to jump in. Well, you can't sit there by yourself, said Midge Meyer. Nobody does that. In fact, a lot of people did, but not in Midge's world. Come over here and have a drink with us. The man slid his chair over to the choir and took a position at the corner of the table, resting his elbows neatly in front of him. We sing in the choir down the street, said Cheryl Blanford, a silver blonde with a dazzling smile. The church choir, St. Ninian's, Anglican, a choir. I'm Lucas, the man told the table. Lucas Darnell. Well met, Lucas, said Lindsay Sterling, a second tenor. Lindsay was the local author, who had published a novel several years previously, a pristine copy of which sat on a shelf in the Thorneside Public Library. Piles of them appeared on book tables at arts festivals in the area. No one knew anyone who had read it. Are you looking for new members? Asked Lucas Darnell. They stared at him as though he'd offered his services as a hitman. No one in anyone's memory had ever asked if they could join the St. Ninian's choir. You don't by any chance sing tenor, do you? Asked Barbara Keating. She felt her gaze drawn to him for some reason. She realized he was staring back at her as she spoke. He started to say something, and she saw him change his mind and say something else. Afraid not. I'm a baritone, but I have a good low register. I can read music pretty well. Would there be room in the bass section? There was a shimmering quality to his speaking voice. Later, one of the women would say it made her think of the Thorn River as it flowed past the church tower. Are you kidding? Squeaked Midge. Ashley will take anyone that can breathe. She stopped, possibly worried that this was not a complimentary invitation. Ashley should be here soon. Stick around and you can meet him. Thanks, I have to go. I'll stop by the church in a few days and speak to him. They watched him leave. A remarkable evening was the consensus. First a car crash involving their own rector, and then a complete stranger asking if he could join the choir. Thorneside was a smallish town, unremarkable, and like most smallish, unremarkable towns, it prided itself on staying that way. Two happenings in one evening had the aura of a big city. Many months later, especially Barbara Keating, felt they needed to remember the exact day that Lucas Darnell came to Thorneside and entered the small severe occupied by the St. Ninian's choir. It was easy to pinpoint it as the day that Father Bannon, left hand stuffed somewhere beneath his clothing, had crashed his car into the oak tree in front of the church. And I'll stop that one there. Just to show that I'm not going to inundate you with readings from the book tonight, I'm going to ask Tom Layton to join me, and we're going to try to sing a song. It's sort of a song, and I'm sort of going to try to sing it. I need your help. And don't worry, I'm not going to make you sing, but I do need, yes. Anybody that knows the chorus is welcome to sing along. I need your help to shout out toward the end of the song 2 words. I want you to sing, and I'll hold this, I made this in case you forget. When I hold this up, you go, aha! Aha! And then 2 seconds later, I want you to sing, oh, yes. Oh, yes. Yes, I bet you're wondering what kind of song I'm going to sing. Now, your part doesn't come till the end, so in case you forget, that's why I got the card. Unless I forget to hold the card up. Nothing, all bets are off.
But you are welcome to join Lynn and I. We answer every phrase that he sings. We answer it. So your part, you don't have to know the words. We'll just listen, and we'll all do our best.
If anyone knows this song and can figure out what I'm saying, they are welcome. Now, one more thing. You may find out, you haven't guessed already, it bears a slight resemblance to Gilbert and Sullivan, but I'm not admitting anything. So, one more thing before I start. I was talking earlier about fiction versus fact, and I can promise that what's in this song is purely fiction, except for one thing, and I'm not going to tell you what that is. When I was a lad, I learned to write by watching commercials on TV each night. But those ads for cigarettes and laundry soap taught me more about writing than I ever could hope.
And I learned about writing than he'd ever know.
I studied those commercials so carefully that now I'm the author of this book, you see. And now Better than I expected, ever. Wonderful. Keep it up. At school I often an F would get, and I barely mastered the alphabet. But a breakfast cereals are new for wax. No teacher did me me on the product facts. But that useless knowledge is so well for me that now I am the author of this book you see.
That useless knowledge is so well for me, and now he's the author of the book you see.
Well, I soon got a job that suited me as copywriter at an agency. I composed quick slogans in 3 words plate, and never a full sentence did I ever write.
And never a full sentence did he ever write.
But those 3-word phrases came so easily that now I am the author of this book you see.
Those 3-word phrases come easily, and now he's the author of the book you see.
Well, my snappy jingles were so admired by a publisher, I soon was hired. I schmoozed with the writers and I took phone calls, and I never thought of reading any books at all.
He never thought of reading any books at all.
I read so little they rewarded me by publishing my novel for a modest fee.
He read so little they rewarded me for publishing a novel for a modest fee.
With its easy words and its simple plot, my book sold faster than cannon shot. I rarely got all my spelling straight, and I hardly ever took the time to punctuate.
He hardly ever took the time to punctuate.
But my unschooled prose did so well for me that now I am the author of this book you see.
His unschooled prose did so well for me, and now he is the author of the book you see.
Now aspiring writers, whomever you may be, if you want to sail on the literary sea, pay close attention to my counsel sage, and you'll sell 1 million copies in the turn of a page.
You'll sell 1 million copies at a turn of a page.
Just read next to nothing. And watch lots of TV.
Oh, yes.
And you all may be authors of a book like me.
Just read next to nothing and watch TV, and you all may be authors of a book like me.
You didn't all work up too much of a sweat singing that. It's warm in here, I know, isn't it? It's a nice ambience. I have a couple more selections I'd like. How's my time doing? Oh, a couple more selections I'd like to read for you before I let you go. This, as I say, has a lot of different characters in it, and eventually they all come together at the end. But I'd like to introduce you to one of the other residents of Thorneside. He's not in the choir. His name is Chuck. And his previous life, he was a paramedic who drove an ambulance in Toronto. Chuck liked a lot of things about living in a small community. Things like how the cashier in the home hardware always asked about his day in her sing-song voice. Never minding how long this took. The people in the line behind him didn't mind either, knowing they were going to be asked about their own days. If they were in a hurry, they were in the wrong place, and they knew it. He liked that the local OPP officer drove home at lunch hour to play with her dog. He liked the way afternoon rush hour meant a 2-minute delay getting over the Thorn River, over the town's one bridge. And he loved the river itself, with its seasons, the chaotic swirling gray of spring, the lazy limpid green of summer, the brown darkness of autumn as colored leaves rustled along the water, and the chilled blue of winter, framed with pure white as the banks developed shoulders of snow-covered ice. All in all, coming to this town and to Lindisfarne County had been one of the best strokes of luck he'd ever experienced. It had been even better luck to land a low-pressure job working for Daggett's funeral home in Thorneside. The salary was commensurate with the pressure, but that was fine. It was enough. Daggett's had begun business in the 1920s as a building supply store. During the Depression, Elias Daggett discovered that he was making more money banging together coffins for people than by selling 2x4s, and he gradually shifted his business to the funeral side. From lumber to slumber, people said about it. Although this was never an official slogan. And Chuck looked after what were called the customer pickups, driving the big black 1991 Cadillac Fleetwood, usually with his co-worker, Ross Much, a cheerful, witty fellow from nearby Riceville First Nation. He also did odd jobs around the funeral home. He took stints on duty during visitations and he drove the remains of the departed to their funeral service and then on to the cemetery, which he did wearing a dark suit and an attempt at a solemn expression. People told him he looked good that way, although some said he had a tendency to spoil his solemn expression by smiling at the mourners too much. Apparently his was not a job for everyone. He'd heard some people were a bit squeamish about the idea of driving dead bodies around the town. As far as Chuck was concerned, after his years of working as a big city paramedic, anyone who wouldn't suddenly gain consciousness and try to throttle him in a drug-fueled rage was a desirable passenger. His interview with Hamish Daggett had gone easily and quickly, which was as well since Chuck was not a talkative sort. "So, why do you want to work for a funeral home?" "Well, the quiet mostly, sir. Things got pretty chaotic in the EMS sometimes." "Well, you won't have to worry about that in this business." Hamish paused so they could chuckle. Chuck just looked at him. There was another reason Chuck wanted to work there, one he would never mention. Unlike those in his ambulance, the passengers he would carry for Daggett's funeral home would never be in danger of being killed by his driving. And I'll stop there. About half the Thorneside stories are told from the points of view of four women who play bridge together. And in fact, if anybody's read, there was a short story in our Northumberland anthology several years ago, Spirit of the Hills anthology, Hill Spirits 4, I think, that was the genesis of almost this whole book, of course, the short story about these four women. Anyway, one of the four, Nobi Bartlett, has just recently become widowed. And the way she became widowed is a plot itself in the book, which you'll have to read. After an interval, she decides it's time to begin dating again, but she has no idea how to get started. Nobi Bartlett looked on the dating sites, but there seemed to be so many, each one with its own specialty. Hatch.com, for singles who wanted to have a child. Swingflame.com, catering to married people who wanted to get out a bit more with other married people. And one called ballandchain.com for wives who were into domination. She even tried one sweetly called marywidow.com, aimed at women with deceased partners. It was all too overwhelming and depressing, even to contemplate. She decided to reassess. The universe was obviously sending her a message about sex. "Back off," the message said. "You are not qualified for this. Ignore the sexual potency they say is just over the horizon. Take up 5-pin bowling." It was time she accepted it. In the election of love, she was last past the post. But then things changed. This time it was meant to be. This time it was Chuck. Chuck Gibbons worked at Daggett's funeral home, although at first she didn't know him by name, only by his smile. She'd caught a glimpse of him holding the front door during her late husband's visitation in March. Nobody saw in an instant that this Daggett's fellow had the type of uncomplicated, open-faced, lanky frame and careless wardrobe that attracted certain women, and she knew she was one. He smiled at her again when he left that evening. She spotted him at the end of May at church when the choir sang at the Dickerbach funeral, and he was on duty attending to the coffin. Nobody decided she had to meet him. On a sunny afternoon, a few days later, she walked through the gilded front entrance of Daggett's funeral home. A very young woman was sitting at the reception desk. Her brass name tag said, Shayla. "Good afternoon," Shayla said, looking sad. "How can I help?" "I'm here to visit someone," Nobby answered. "Ah, yes. The name?" Bartlett," she said. Shayla clicked her mouse and looked at her computer. "I'm sorry, I haven't anyone on my list by that name. Are you sure they're here?" "Oh, no," said Nobby, "that's my name." Shayla looked relieved. "I'm certainly not here to visit myself." Shayla laughed tentatively. "I'm here to see a young man." "Ah, do you know the young man's name?" Shayla asked, looking at her computer screen again, apparently glad to be back on track. "No." "Oh," said Shayla, again crestfallen. "But he has a nice smile." "And I'm sure they have given him back that nice smile," Shayla said reassuringly. I saw him at a funeral a few weeks ago," Nobby said, trying to help this poor young woman. "You saw him at another funeral?" Shayla was rising from her chair. "Yes, he was standing beside the casket." "I'd better get my boss," Shayla said quickly. "Wait," Nobby said. She figured it out. "The young man works here." "Oh," Shayla said, absorbing this new information. "Oh, you must mean Chuck." Her laugh was shrilled. "Yes, he does have a nice smile. He's in the back. I'll call him." After his shift was over, Chuck and Nobi went out for coffee. He remembered her perfectly from the church and seemed genuinely interested in hearing about her life. He sat quietly and listened to her answers to his simple questions, which was unlike anything she'd experienced in her life. The years between their ages seemed to attract rather than repulse him. He asked her if Nobi was short for anything. "Zenobia," she said, "a dumb hippie name my parents gave me." He had never heard the name before, a fact that somehow drove her wild. She couldn't take her eyes off him. For one thing, it seemed like she'd finally met a man who was completely unaware of how unattractive he was. Of how attractive he was, I'm sorry. He was completely unaware of how attractive he was. He also appeared to be drawn to her, and she wasn't about to question why, in heaven's name, that should be. It was mutual attraction, pure and simple, and that was enough for her. She began to plan once again. A few chaste dates did nothing but lubricate her resolve to seduce this man by any means possible. And I'll stop there. Before we don't outstay our welcome here with Olinda, I'm going to move on and wrap up here and schmooze for another little while. The good part about reading a book at a launch, or going to a reading at a launch at any rate, is you can listen to the author read, and if you don't like what you hear, you don't have to buy the book. You just slink out without buying it. I have relieved the guards at the door, by the way, so you can go. In absentia, though, let you escape into the night after I thank a few people, though. In absentia, I'd like to thank my mentor and colleague, Terry Paulus, whose support for unknown emerging writers is legendary in this country. He's a Canadian treasure, surely. And I have to say that although I'm certainly unknown, and I'd like to think myself more as a submerging writer than an emerging writer, I do appreciate his support. I didn't invite many people from Toronto this evening because I didn't want to inflict the afternoon rush hour on anyone. Nevertheless, my daughter Laura made it. I think she's on a mission for perfect attendance. At my last launch, she finished teaching a class at McGill in Montreal, drove straight to Toronto, attended my launch, then drove all the way back that night in time to teach the next morning. And she ran out of gas just this side of the Quebec border, I think. So let's call that dedication to going to book launches myself. Thank you very much to Olinda Casimiro and the AGN for hosting us this evening. It is a beautiful venue. Holy smoke, I couldn't have asked for it. All these dreams about book launches. I never thought of having a backdrop like this. It's wonderful. It's almost worth writing another book just so I can have a launch here. I'd like to thank Tom Layton again, keyboard artist extraordinaire. We had literally no rehearsal for our song. We ran through it a couple of times before you all got here. That was it. But it's a very talented musician who can follow me with little or no rehearsal. So thanks to Tom. Thank you, Tom. I think I might have mentioned Tom is a long-time collaborator with Marie Lynn Hammond, who's Canadian treasure, iconic folk singer. She couldn't be here tonight, but I was glad that Tom could come and play. I'd like to thank Iguana Books for publishing my book, and especially Jennifer Bogart of Let's Talk Books for coming tonight to sell some of them. So thank you, Jennifer. I think you might also remember, I'm 1/3 of a singing trio called What Fun! Exclamation mark. The other third, Marie Lynn, is not here, as I've said, but the third is really the brains behind the operation, Lynn Bilton. Lynn was helpful to me in scoping out this venue. In fact, I wouldn't probably have known about it if she hadn't shown it to me. So, and she helped with planning the events as well. So thank you, Lynn, wherever you are. When we moved here to Northumberland in 2017, I almost immediately felt, I don't know, other people may have felt this too, I almost felt like I'd come home. And the people I've met since have only reinforced that feeling. So thanks to you for coming this evening, and thank you for making me feel at home for the last 5 years. Now, the events of today raise a slight topic in my mind. I don't want to go into it too much, but I want to say that at a time like today, you often think of continuity. I do anyway. Think of the past and what leads to the future. I think that The very definition of literature is continuity. It tells us of our past, our present, and our future. And we think of our beautiful, wonderful English language, from Beowulf to Sally Rooney, or from Chaucer to Seamus Heaney. We can be aware of the incredible sense of continuity we have through our lives, our language, and our writers and our literature. I've always wanted to be grateful for that. So if you want continuity in your life, all you have to do is open a book, as far as I'm concerned. And anyway, with that, I'll say good evening. Thank you again for coming. And I hope some of you will buy my book, which I'll be signing over there. Thank you.